So I'm very honored tonight to share with you a special person to me. Her name is Lynn Whitesell. She is a global thought leader in the world of human resources, organizational, executive development, and training and development. She is here with us today, and I want to share a little bit about her. So she is a global organizational effectiveness and leadership development executive, management consultant, and executive coach. And she's co-founder and managing partner of Harris Whitesell Consulting with me, and we're a leading global management firm. And she's going to share with us today a really cool program about cohesion, about agility, and being a dynamic leader, and how you can develop your teams in times of, like we're in, the epidemic times and these crisis times. And so sit back and take notes. Again, if you are interested in asking Lynn questions, please use the chat box. And at the end, we'll go ahead and have a Q&A session. So Lynn, give me one moment. I'm going to set this up.
Laura, are you going to put the slide deck up, or?
Yes, I'm getting there right now. One moment, you all. One moment. I'm going to mute myself and get it up there for you, Lynn. One moment.
Okay. You hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, all right. Thank you guys for the invitation to be with you this evening. And so Lori asked me to talk about some insights into the behaviors of cohesive and productive teams. And well, that's actually more important now than ever. So if I were to ask you, in order to build, I'll let Lori get to the slide. So, but in order to build a lasting, Lori, we're a little ahead. Yeah, okay. In order to build a lasting organization, a company must have a sustainable competitive advantage, and you have to understand what your competitive advantage is. So if I were to ask you, what is your company's competitive advantage? These are some of the things that you would probably think about. And I think everybody can see the deck, but some of those things are intellectual properties or distribution rights or your marketing strategy or your working capital or the barriers to entry. Those types of things would be what you would think about. And understanding your competitive advantage is critical. Competitive advantage is about your company's unique skills and resources and working to implement strategies but your competitors can't implement as effectively as you can. And your competitive advantage is the reason you're in business, and it's what draws customers to your product or service instead of a competitor's. And you deliberately make choices unique and different in activities that you're great at and that you focus on, and this gives you a competitive advantage. And so a question I would ask of you would be, did you know that teamwork is actually the ultimate competitive advantage? And we're going to talk about why that is the case and how you can better develop your teams, whether it be your Rotary team or your work team or an athletic team, whatever the team may be. But teamwork is the ultimate competitive advantage. Patrick Lencioni is a person whose model I will be discussing this evening. He is the guru of organizational health, and he wrote a very popular, very famous book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. If you've never read it, it's fast and easy to read and certainly worth worthwhile and worth your time to read that book. And there's a model for cohesive teams that he's developed based on that book. So he says that it's not finance and it's not strategy and it's not technology, but it's teamwork that remains the ultimate competitive advantage. And the reason for that is because it's so powerful and it's so rare. Real, honest to goodness, nitty gritty teamwork is very, very rare. Well, if we were talking about what's the definition of teamwork, well, it's about how you and the people you work with adapt your behaviors so you can get more done in less time and achieve collective results. That's what teamwork is all about. Another quote from Patrick Lencioni: if you could get all the people in an organization or club or whatever rowing in the same direction, you could dominate any industry, any market, any competition at any time, getting everybody in the same boat and rowing in the same direction. So what's hard about it? What's hard about teamwork? It seems like it should be an easy thing. Well, most of you were leaders, and by human nature, most leaders have a much easier time holding people accountable for the results than they do for behavioral problems and behavioral issues. And this is a problem because behavioral problems almost always precede results. Communication and behavior are what leads to results. So that means that team members have to be willing to call each other out on behavioral issues, as uncomfortable as that can be. And if they see their leader balking at doing that and handling difficult situations, they're not going to do it themselves. And we'll talk about what kind of team that leads to. So it's a strategic choice that you make. Teamwork is. It's not a virtue. It is a choice. It's a choice to get more done in less time. There are lots of positive things about teams. Increased efficiency, boosted creativity. You have a support network. Productivity goes way up. You innovate. Morale is great. People are engaged. Things get done faster and better. Service is better. Your customers are happier, or the quality is better, and you get the best talent. And people want to stay with you. And it drives the health of your organization. Teamwork drives the health. So this is the book I mentioned, but so why is teamwork so rare? It's because it's very hard to truly achieve. And the reason for this is because most teams succumb to the 5 dysfunctions of a team. At the base of that is lack of trust. And not just trust, but vulnerable trust. And we'll talk about that. That leads to fear of conflict. Without conflict, there's a lack of commitment. Without commitment, there's not accountability. And without accountability, there's inattention to results and things are not achieved. Trust, conflict, commitment, accountability, and trust. So if you have a team that is dysfunctional, you will have a team that is holding grudges, dreading meetings, mostly because they're boring and nothing gets done, or they're full of conflict and everybody screams and yells. Teams, they lack confidence, they fear failure, they miss deadlines, they miss deliverables, they waste time, they certainly don't trust each other, and they rarely defeat competitors. These are not, in a group of competitors, they're not going to be the leader at all. If there's dysfunctional teams, they're going to be the opposite. They're going to be the tail end. Functional teams have strong organizational health. They collaborate, they innovate, they perform and deliver, and they wow the customer. And by doing that, they defeat competitors, and they have a lot of fun. And I think most of us like to have fun, whatever it is that we're doing, while achieving results. So those are the 5 dysfunctions. So how can you achieve the ultimate competitive advantage of teamwork? Well, you can do this by rooting out those causes of dysfunction and learning the keys to overcoming them. The intuitive wisdom or conventional wisdom says that dysfunction is not identifiable and you can't cure it, but it is, and you can. But you have to be willing to take risk and be vulnerable and open and honest. You have to value conflict. You have to enter into healthy conflict, healthy debate, and you make your team functional and cohesive by employing the right levels of courage and discipline and energy that many groups, many teams cannot seem to muster. And I use the word group there on purpose because a team that doesn't do this is not a team. They are a group. They're a group of individuals, and there's not a lot of I's in team, but there are a lot of I's in a group. And so you have to root out those causes of dysfunction and learn the keys to overcoming them. I have a model here to show you. Hopefully you can see it. So this is Patrick Lencioni's model. You'll notice at the bottom of that is trust. It is foundational to everything else with a team. And it's not just any kind of trust. It's a vulnerable trust, and we'll talk about that. But when there's absence of trust, it is dysfunctional. And so what can you do about that? You can go first. You can be vulnerable. And we'll talk more about those kinds of things. But you be the leader in establishing trust. Next, from trust is fear of conflict. So you have to mine for that conflict. You have to seek out that conflict. You have to understand how to have healthy conflict and healthy debates and what that looks like. And then if you're fearing conflict, you're going to have a lack of commitment. So how can you overcome that? You can overcome that by forcing clarity and closure. Forcing clarity and closure. You ever left a meeting where there was no clarity, there was no closure, it was open-ended, and you were like, well, I just wasted an hour of my life that I could have been doing something else. You might have had that meeting today more than once. And that is a dysfunction of a team that causes a dysfunctional team. So without trust and with fear of conflict and with a lack of commitment, there's a great, huge avoidance of accountability. As a matter of fact, everybody will look to the leader to hold everyone else accountable. And there'll be a lot of tattletelling, like telling on each other and not holding each other accountable, not holding yourself accountable, but asking the leader or looking to the leader to do all that. And so how do you counter that? The key to that is confronting difficult issues. And we're going to talk more about each of these. So again, if you have absence of trust and fear of conflict, there's no commitment, you avoid accountability, there's definitely going to be inattention to results. And particularly any kind of collective results. So you have to really focus on collective outcomes. And again, we're going to talk more about each of these. So these are dysfunctions. So you need to build a cohesive team. So you have to create that climate that facilitates that productive emotional experience. So your team can collaborate so they can perform. You have to have that, you know this one, that shared mission, vision, and values to harness the team's expertise. Your high-performing teams really depend on this. Teams that are not high-performing could care less. We don't want to have teams that are not high-performing. That means clear roles and responsibilities. The team knows what's expected, what behaviors are expected of each other, and there's a framework for those expectations and a framework for decision-making and a framework for resolving conflicts. But foundational to absolute everything else, most importantly, building a cohesive team requires a commitment to an environment of trust. So if we compare the models, on the right is the model of the dysfunctional model: absence of trust, fear of conflict, lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, and inattention to results. So what if instead we were to build trust, and we were to embrace conflict and commitment and accountability, and it's all about collective results? That's the 5 behaviors model versus the 5 dysfunctions model. I want to go into the 5 behaviors model because that is how you build truly cohesive. And by cohesive, a team cannot be productive if they are not cohesive. So cohesive and productive teams is what we're going to talk about from this point on. The deck went away.
Hang on.
We're hanging on.
Oh man, what happened? I apologize, everybody. There we go.
Okay. So if we were looking at the next slide, and we were just going to explore then
Hey, it's my first time, y'all. I apologize.
Go to the one that has the 2 models and then go to the next one.
There we go. Hang on. All
We'll
righty.
go to the next one.
Woohoo.
Okay. So the foundation of a cohesive team is trust. And we're not talking about any kind of trust. We're talking about a vulnerable trust. Not I trust that you're going to show up to the meeting, but I trust that I can have an honest conversation with you and I can truly be myself. And I can be authentic with you. And without that, you can't have any other part of the model. So be sure and think of the words vulnerable trust. Vulnerable trust, by the way, is not easy to build. You have to really, really go out of your way and be aware, first of all, that that is important to build, and then really work on it. And it takes some time, but mostly what it takes is courage, a whole lot of humility, and a whole lot of discipline, and a whole lot of courage to really establish. And it starts with the leader. So as a leader, it's your responsibility to start this building of trust. So team members have to feel safe to be genuinely transparent with one another, to be authentic with each other. Have you ever been on a team where no one could say I was wrong, or I made a mistake, or I need help, or I'm not sure, or you're better at that than I am, or I'm sorry, or any of those? I certainly have. I've been on that team, and it wasn't a very effective team. And unfortunately, I was on that team for a number of years. We were eventually able to bring it around using this model and have a different kind of a team. And it was a global HR leadership team that was quite dysfunctional. And so the model really, really worked. And I can talk to you more about how it did, but you have to get to the point where members of the team can say these things. Can you say these things? Can you say these things right now in the team that you're working with right now? In this meeting, would you feel okay saying, I need help, or you're better than me, or I'm sorry, or I made a mistake, or I don't know, or I was wrong? So unless you can bring yourself to readily speak these words when the situation calls for it, what's going to happen is the team's going to waste time and energy. What are they going to waste time and energy on? They're going to waste time and energy wondering, what was that person's true intent? What do they mean by that? Looking for hidden messages or hidden meanings, or looking for all kinds of things, wasting time on politics, and just really wasting a lot of time, never really being able to get into the idea of healthy conflict, because you certainly can't have any kind of healthy conflict if you don't trust each other with that kind of a vulnerable trust. Interestingly, I've done some work with teams using this model, and we go through a trust exercise. And it's one of the first things that we do, and it's always with teams that have been working with each other for quite a while. And in that trust exercise, I asked them to think about their childhood and think about something that was very memorable and impactful in their childhood that they would be willing to share with the team. And I've been amazed at what people would share. And I've shed tears. I've shared joy. But getting super duper vulnerable with each other has allowed these teams, when you go back and you talk to them and you follow up, and they've had these shared experiences of vulnerability, the strength of the team is so much more than it was before, because they've gotten underneath the surface, they've gotten beyond the superficial, they've really gotten to know each other. There was one team I was working with the CEO seemed to block, the CFO seemed to block. This was a C-suite team. So CEO, CFO, CMO, CIO, there was several CXOs on the team, and they were quite dysfunctional. And they particularly pointed out the CFO, because the CFO they saw was a blocker, somebody who would never let them spend a dime on anything. It blocked everything. And they really thought, they were having thoughts of this person needed to be a part of the team. Well, they engaged in this exercise of vulnerability, and there's more to it than what I mentioned to you. But what came out was that the CFO had lost his father as a very, very young man. He was a boy. His father was very young, in his 30s, I think. And the boy he became the father substitute at the age of 10 or 12, and with a mother and 3 young sisters. And the times were very, very hard. And they ended up going from shelter to shelter and being homeless and living in cars. And so that translated to how he was as a CFO, and his not approving things or not approving monies to be spent and being really tough with budgets was more how he showed his care for the team, and that the team and the company always be successful and have the financial resources they needed so they didn't go homeless or lose things they need, rather than an attempt to block someone or shut someone down. And once they really understood that, wow, things really opened up for that team. So building trust. Here's what you'll see when a team has trust. When a team has trust, they're vulnerable, they're open to one another, they're not afraid to admit the truth about themselves. They don't have facades or pretend people that they become in the meetings. And I know you've been in meetings where you know that it's a facade because you actually know the person, but others don't. The honest and transparent conversations, it has to be maintained. Trust has to be earned and maintained. Then it takes some maintenance, like a marriage does. It takes some maintenance, and it takes a lot of courage. The self-preservation thing is people naturally want to preserve themselves and be self-preservationist, if that's a word. You have to get beyond that to think of the better good of the team when you're trusting. There's no political behavior that's wasting everyone's time and energy if the team really has trust. And they trust one another at a fundamental emotional level, and they can be completely, truly themselves and open without filters. And if you've never been on a team like that, the difference between a team like that and a team with an absence of trust is night and day. Most teams have an absence of trust. Remember when I talked about the fact that teamwork is the number one competitive advantage because it's so rare and so hard to do? It's because it's so hard to build this foundation. Teams are just not willing to put in the work, or leaders they're not willing to take the risk. They're not willing to be vulnerable to do this. So with absence of trust, there's a game of masquerade going on at all times. People are pretending to know things that they don't know. They're looking out for number one, themselves. They have a mentality of never let them see me sweat. They're wasting time and energy thinking about what they should say, or what the others are what they're meaning by what they're saying. There's just a lot of waste that happens with absence of trust. And I think as I'm saying this, you probably recognize this in teams that you've been on in the past, or maybe teams that you're on now, this absence of trust and how it impacts things. So mastering conflict, the model was the next part of the model. So when there is this vulnerable trust, team members are able to fully engage in that healthy discussion, that healthy debate, that conflict with each other. For some of you, when I say conflict, you think, oh no, bad. The opposite of conflict is let's have no conflict. You have to have conflict on a team. Without conflict on a team, nothing happens, nothing changes, everything stays the same. Nobody's willing to stick their neck out. Nobody's willing to put their ideas on the table because you don't trust each other. And only team members who trust each other are going to feel comfortable to engage in that unfiltered and passionate debate about issues and decisions that are important to the team. Not every little thing, but things that are important, key things. So teams who've mastered this conflict are able to tap into the skills of each other, get all the ideas on the table, consider everybody's perspectives and opinions in their decision making, so they're able to get the best decisions. Teams that avoid conflict or have unhealthy conflict where it's just a scream fest or a chest pounding fest or a table pounding fest or just harsh words without any trust or any vulnerability, detrimental to teams for sure, and stops progress. So what does a team look like that has mastered conflict? Well, you do have that unfiltered debate and that pursuit of truth. And you do push each other outside of your emotional comfort zones, and you don't hesitate to disagree and challenge and question each other in the spirit of finding the best answers for the team and whatever the team is working on. So, understanding each other's as point of view. You're not avoiding each other. There's no avoidance, and not afraid to engage in that passionate dialogue around key issues and decisions. Again, you can see this is rare. There may be some teams who are doing this, but what if your team did? What if your work teams, some of you are business owners, what if you were able to do this? Others of you work in organizations. What if your team is for the health of you, your team, and your organization? Fear of conflict. What if your team has fear of conflict? Well, politics abound. Everything is political. There's hallway conversations. You both leave the meeting and agree in the meeting and turn around outside a meeting. You're saying that's never going to work. I just didn't want to speak up. I didn't want there to be any conflict. There's competition. People are looking to win the argument. There's maybe the opposite of that. There's artificial harmony, which I just discussed. It gets mean-spirited. And you certainly don't get all the best ideas and the best decisions out on the table. Patrick Lencioni says, our ability to engage in passionate, unfiltered debate about what we need to do to succeed will determine our future as much as any product or products we develop or partnerships we sign. I'm going to say that again. Our ability to engage in passionate, unfiltered debate about what we need to do to succeed will determine our future as much or more as any product we develop or any partnership we enter into. That's an impactful statement. So after you have built the trust and you've mastered the conflict and you now can achieve commitment. So achieving commitment requires clarity and buy-in. So when team members are able to offer up their opinions, debate the ideas, they're more likely to get that buy-in and that clarity with honest support and achieve real commitment rather than just the head nods that you get and moving on, which happens. How many times do you have commitments at the end of meetings for what a person's going to do before the next meeting and then it doesn't happen? It means there was no real commitment to do it. That's just a small example. So when people know their colleagues have no reservations about disagreeing with one another and that every available opinion and perspective has been aired, they will have the confidence to embrace the decision. Whether it was their input or not, their decision or not, they will embrace the decision of the team. So when commitment has been achieved, this is what it looks like on a team. It's about a group of intelligent people buying into a decision precisely when they don't naturally agree. That's when you know that you've got true commitment. You've been able to have some healthy conflict. Buy-in and clarity is there. People feel heard. There's clear direction. I see laughing faces like, how does that really happen? They support the decision. And it's honest support in the decision. With lack of commitment, there's delay. Stuff doesn't get done. People are frustrated with each other. People don't feel heard. They feel like their opinion didn't matter, or nobody even cared enough to even hear their opinion. Or if they did hear it, they dismissed it without the discussion that needed to happen. There's no clarity of direction. You ever left that meeting where you thought you had clarity of direction and you had 3 different people in the meeting and all 3 of you had a different idea of what you agreed to do? That's very, very common. You think as a leader, the decision has been made and it's very clear. It's clear and people have bought in. And then you realize when you meet with each individually, there was 3 completely different ideas of what was decided. And again, people nodding their head and moving forward. So Lencioni, what he has to say about this one is most people don't really need to get their way in order to buy into a decision. They just want to be heard. They want their ideas heard. They want their ideas understood and considered and explained within the context of the ultimate decision. And if it is, again, they will buy in and commit to the ultimate decision, even if it wasn't theirs. And that is how you get a group of intelligent people buying into a decision precisely when they don't naturally agree. That's how you do it. It's not easy. It's hard, so it's rare. So embracing accountability. So you have built the trust, you have the healthy conflict, you have the commitment, you've achieved that. Now you can embrace the accountability. So members of effective teams hold one another accountable. They step into that discomfort of telling somebody what he or she needs to hear. And they can do that because when there's true trust, when you really have vulnerable trust with each other and you're able to be your true self, somebody's able to give you some true feedback and you are not hurt by it. You can embrace it. So people are really, really hesitant. Isn't it fun when you're a leader? What's your favorite part of the year? Oh, the part of the year when I get to do performance management stuff and I get to give all of my people some feedback. Well, hopefully you're doing it more than once a year, and hopefully you're also giving them something called feed forward. But leaders hate it. They hate doing it. Lots and lots of leaders really back away from giving each other and telling people what they really need to hear. And if you really trust somebody, you can listen to what they have to say and take it as a gift. Feedback truly, truly is a gift if you're on this kind of a team. They go directly to one another. They give that frank and honest feedback, and it's not meant in a hurtful way. It's meant in a helpful way. And they remind one another when they're not living up to agreed upon performance standards. Teams that really, really embrace accountability, they actually take it a step further. They hold each other accountable because they have it as a part of their team mantra that by holding back and not giving this feedback, they're hurting not only the team, but they're hurting their teammates, they're hurting themselves, and they're hurting their company. And when you go into it with that kind of framework versus this person told me something I didn't want to hear, they would just be an ugly and mean-spirited. It's different. And when you don't trust, you will take it as ugly and mean-spirited. And when you do trust, you will take it for the gift that it is. So they trust and respect each other, which enables them to overcome the most important challenge of building a team on which people hold one another accountable. And that is overcoming the understandable reluctance of individuals to give one another critical feedback. That's a really hard obstacle to get beyond. Now, you probably have members on your team who have no problem with that whatsoever. But when they're giving that free feedback, do you have that vulnerable trust with them? Do you trust it to be the gift that it is, or do you look at it in another way? And it could be intended in another way. When you have a team that doesn't have the trust, you cannot have the accountability. As you can see, these are building blocks to each other. So on a team where accountability is embraced, there's a willingness to confront difficult issues, not just sweep them aside or put them away or table it for the next meeting. On a strong team, accountability occurs directly among peers. So they're not looking for the boss or the leader to hold everyone else accountable. They hold themselves and everyone else accountable. That honest feedback is there. When there's an avoidance accountability, there's a whole lot of finger pointing. It's his fault, it's her fault. Everybody, again, is looking to the leader. There's a tattletale. They're looking to the leader to hold people accountable. So they're telling on each other. Did you know that Lori did so-and-so, or Susie, or whoever? And there's no ownership. There's an absolute lack of ownership when there's a lack of accountability. So what Patrick Lencioni had to say about this one was, more than any policy or system, there's nothing like the fear of letting down a respected teammate that motivates people to improve their own performance. And that's the truth. And then, so you've built the trust, you have the healthy conflict, you've embracing the accountability and the commitment accountability. And now the last part of it, all of that you did to get results. All of that leads to results. Can you get results without doing that? You can get some kind of results. You can get minimized results. And if you're a team achieving a lot, imagine what you could do if you were a truly cohesive team, if you had all these things. So it's exponential how much more successful you could be. So focusing on results. The only way a team can be certain it will remain focused on collective results rather than individual results is to ensure that team members are holding one another accountable for what they need to do, what they've promised to do. Truly cohesive teams focus, and the word here is obsessively. They focus obsessively on the collective results of the entire organization, and they're intolerant of actions and behaviors that serve the interests of individuals but don't promote the common good. Let's say that again. You ever been on that team? Obsessively, truly cohesive teams focus obsessively on the collective results of the entire organization. So not me as a leader, or not my team, or not my silo, or not my function, but the entire collective result. And they're not just don't like action behaviors that serve individual interests, they're intolerant of it. They call each other out on it if it's not promoting the common good. And as a result, team members are willing to make sacrifices in order to drive the collective results of their teams. Imagine, I was telling you about a team that I worked with that was getting okay results. They spent some time working. They did an assessment to find out where they were, where they need to focus, where were they lacking the most, what was getting in their way the most. They did a formal assessment. We spent some time working with them. And I don't want to share anything that's confidential, but I haven't told your name. I mean, the outcomes, this happened to be a pharmaceutical company, to a clinical research organization to be exact. The outcomes of the work that they did on that showed obsessively, if I want to use that word, in the results that they got, both financially, from an engagement standpoint of employees, from a results, from a profit margin, from customer goodwill, from more customers entering the arena. It was exponential. So they are looking to do this kind of work throughout their organization of really obsessively focusing on cohesive teams. So on the next slide, teams that trust one another and engage in conflict and commit to decisions and hold one another accountable and set aside their individual needs and agendas and focus almost exclusively on what's best for their team. That's where you see truly a focus on results, a focus on collective outcomes, a sacrifice for the greater good versus the silo mentality and this all about me or my team. So the ultimate goal of building greater trust and conflict and commitment and accountability is one thing: the achievement of collective results. That's what the whole thing is all about. So this was just really a summary of that. The single most untapped competitive advantage of any organization is teamwork. And to gain it, you have to trust one another, be genuinely transparent and honest with one another, build that vulnerability-based trust so you can engage in healthy conflict around ideas. So you then can commit to decisions. And when team members are able to offer opinions and debate ideas, they're way more likely to commit to the decision and hold one another accountable. And when everybody's committed to that clear plan of action, when there's clarity and buy-in, they're more willing to hold one another accountable, which leads to that hyper focus on achieving the collective results. And so the ultimate goal to building greater trust, conflict, commitment, accountability is that one thing of achieving collective results. So in summary, why teamwork? Why now? You can make better decisions, faster decisions, tap into the skills and opinions of everybody, avoid wasting time, avoid politics and confusion and destruction and destructive conflict, avoid wasting time talking about the wrong things and revisiting the same topics over and over and over and over again because you didn't have the right clarity and buy-in. And it's just plain and simply more fun. You enjoy it much more. And who doesn't want to have a little more enjoyment and joy in their day? And it creates the ultimate competitive advantage of teamwork, which was results. And so that's why teamwork, why now? So bringing together everyone's personalities and everybody's preferences to form that cohesive, productive team takes a lot of work. I'm not kidding you, it takes work. The payoff, though, can be tremendous. It can be huge for the person, for the team, and for the organization. And you can assess your team. Lynn has assessments and customizable workshops. They have that one mission, which is to build those truly cohesive teams. These assessments really focus on existing teams, putting the model into practice. And they don't just gain a knowledge of the model, and how they're currently performing, but also concrete ideas of where to focus the energy moving forward. If you find that you want to do that, you can reach out to me, you can reach out to Lori, and we'll be glad to help you. But hopefully, if not, there's still some basic ideas here that you can put into play with any team that you know are working on, or that you are a member of, or that you are a leader of. And with that,